The Proleptic Journal of a Shite-Extractor Tractor Man by Scott Waller. 6. 2 days later. The new job saps a fair amount of energy out of me, but not as much as I imagined. I have enough mental power to wonder if I've chosen the best PES plan. Perhaps I should have gone for early retirement in order to live like a king for a short period. Go out in a blaze of glory. After all, what's the point in living a long life if you can't live life to the full? I don't want to think too hard about this. It makes me feel awkward. I can't afford to have feelings like that at work as I'm being monitored in my new position. Who knows what they'll do if they catch me indulging in negative vibes. Around a week later. Much as usual. I'm getting on better with Fred. His yes, maybes, dunnos, and I suppose so's end up having a relaxing effect on you. While he was half napping, I was speaking with one of the younger colleagues of our room who has spent the last couple of days in her strap-in chair. She listened to my thoughts about the job and about my working alongside Fred with patience. I was glad I could have my say, because although Fred seems placid, there's no saying what he might say to other colleagues or, worse, to our boss when I'm not there. The boss is often away on business, so we never see him, but when I next speak to him, it might be wise for me to mention my reservations about Fred, just in case Fred has said something against me. As far as domestic bliss goes, the news is that I gave Dolly a reprogramming update. It was a costlier operation than the last time I had her done, but I think it'll be worth it. She has more subtle character traits. Her empathy program is more refined. She's less sexually demanding. The virtual spouse consultant at the nearby sex doll dealers who did the upgrade said that as I evolve, my wife needs to evolve with me. The old generation of programs failed to have that kind of subtle modification built into them. I didn't like the sound of it at first. It felt like there was something wrong with me rather than her. But we had a chat, and he eventually persuaded me to try it out. So I did. 1 day later. I think that Fred's problem is that he has ACT, anti-chirpy tendencies. Obviously, too much anti-chirpiness is not allowed in company life. It's bad for morale. I'm not saying he's reached compulsory re-education level yet, but he can't be too far off, and he must realise it. That probably only makes things worse. The Guardian's mood detectors will soon notice if his gloom reaches the mandatory treatment level. At Shinli, you're allowed to have the occasional off day, but you're not allowed to moan about everything the way Fred does. I don't know if he's been in trouble for anti-chirpiness in the past. I hope so, because he needs to be told that it's not right. It's not good for me to hear him at it all the time. It's unfair for one miserable person to infect others. Contagion can lead to the social scourge of unhappiness that has all but been eliminated since the Hedonite Revolution. Society does all in its power to prevent unhappiness. That's another thing that differentiates us from you. You were allowed to be unhappy. I once heard that in your era, the English were inveterate grumblers, while in the Parisian region, carping was a badge of virtue. You can be thankful that life for your descendants will not be as unhappy as yours. In your day, there was little you could do for unhappy people. For us, by contrast, since we have an abundance of ways to fight unhappiness, we consider ostensible unhappiness to be a form of social deviance. There's no excuse for it, with so much accessible hedono equipment at our disposal, and so much effort gone into rooting out unhappiness. It is an insult to society to be a misery guts. That's why, in our day, instead of standing by passively and allowing people to wallow in their unhappiness, society takes a proactive role in forcing the unhappy to be happy. For us it makes sense to give minor fines for excessive overt manifestations of unhappiness. It's like a friendly warning. I've had it done to me a couple of times, and I can assure you that it was the best thing that could have happened to me at the time. I took the necessary measures, and I was fit as a fiddle afterwards. Persistent offenders are sent out on re-education programs. In your day, you could be so unhappy that you might even go as far as committing suicide. For us, suicide is completely illegal and virtually unthinkable. Attempted suicide among the young entails compulsory retreatment. Repeated offences carry severe penalties. You see, suicide is a form of homicide. Just as the murder of any other individual human being is a murder, so suicide perpetration involves the murder of someone's innocent self by his or her legally culpable self. It's an insult to the life of the community that sustains your life, an insult to our joy-affirming values. Luckily, potential or suspected self-killers are usually weeded out early on, and their development is monitored closely. Hyper-sophisticated automated programs keep the vast majority of potential self-killers from committing their crime. In most cases, the potential subject does not know when such a program is being applied. It starts automatically when needed, adjusting doses and rerouting neuroprompts over time, and stops when redundant. Many of these young people will not be able to tell the difference between a joy-inflating modification in their neurodramas and a blues-busting psycho-rectification intervention. If certain determined individuals actually attempt the act of self-murder, they are usually found, revived, and charged. Then they are packed off to a HSRH, High Security Reform House, where they undergo an intense punitive re-education treatment. It's only right that they're made an example of. But rest assured, HSRH is not like the prison of your day, a place where you locked people away and took pleasure in the thought that they, as bad people, were suffering the woes of institutional punishment. High Security Reform House interns come out transformed and, unlike those released from your prisons, readjust to normal life. While you lot used to be worried about ex-detainees as soon as you heard that they had been inside, we are not, because we have confidence in our efficient re-education programs. That said, there are some exceptional cases of potential self-murderers who are persistently determined to do away with themselves. If such people agree not to take the initiative illegally, they can apply for pre-retirement euthanasia. This is very rare and involves a lot of time, effort, patience, and bureaucratic rigmarole. If they can stomach the protocol, the questions and answers, tests, the neuroform filling, the possible granting of request followed by rejection and other hurdles, they may get to bump themselves off legally, but the process is designed to be tough, so as to save as many candidates as possible who still have an underlying desire to go on living. Candidates granted permission have to give up their body for scientific research. This is a silver lining, for the self-murderer does not fully take away all the life his community gave him, since society can get back a portion of what it is owed. Naturally, everything that I've just said about preserving individual lives does not apply to those whose age has gone way beyond the high productivity peak. Fred, for example, is free to do himself in at any moment via a speedy PES program, as I will be in a few years' time. A fine prospect. 4 days later. I've just learnt that Fred is being transferred to another department. I did wonder whether the strap-in Guardian's anti-chirpiness detectors were working properly, because you'd have thought that they'd have got to work on him by now. Then the thought came to me that they might not bother with unhappiness detection for employees of a certain age. What if we're no longer worth the effort? What if they don't mind if we drift slowly towards self-murderous tendencies as we hit retirement age? Worse, what if the automated systems plan for this so as to get rid of us? What a horrible thought. I don't know where it came from. I'd better unthink it forthwith. No, Fred has probably been through the standard treatment for his moodiness. If he has never talked to me about it, but he wouldn't want to if it didn't have the hoped for success, because he would know that its failure would not bode well for him. Still, I do feel a bit sorry for him. He wasn't a big talker, but we didn't get on too badly in the end. I wonder if he'll be replaced. The following week. I have just said goodbye to poor old Fred. He's leaving next week. I invited him round to my place. We had about as fine an afternoon as you could have with Fred, I introduced him to Dolly. He seemed impressed. Naturally, I asked if he wanted to try her out. At first he said he wasn't in the mood. I think he thought it might bother me or something. You can never tell with him. I was always unsure how to interpret his silences. Was he shy, polite, hiding something? Or was he just as dopey as he looked? I think he's a little old-fashioned at heart. To be on the safe side, I insisted he tried our excellent oral option, and in the end he accepted. But even then I don't know if he was accepting out of politeness. All the same, the experience seemed to cheer him up. There was a kind of croakiness in his voice, like he was emotional. I suppose it wasn't the blowjob, although that was no doubt nice enough, so much as the fact that another human being offered him something for nothing. Anyways, that was Fred. He's gone on to smaller things in another department, and is already mentally focused on his retirement. Out with the old, bring in the new. 4 days later. Back to work after the weekend. It's funny, I didn't think I'd miss him, but I now realise that it's not the same without Fred. I regret some of the things I said about him. I was a bit harsh. I've been thinking about it all weekend. His absence gave me a dose of the old blues again, a feeling that none of the office's virtual medical remedies were able to eradicate completely. I'm a bit worried that all this blues nonsense is going to start up again. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and after talking with Fred, we both came to the conclusion that the automatic hedonoregulators are not so good at their job of correcting your state of mind when you're older. I feel more adrift from things than I used to. Gives you pause for thought. 2 days later. I tried to get in touch with Fred, but he seems to be busy in his department and spends much of his time a long way from where we used to work together. I hope he doesn't have any bad feelings about my staying on in the department that he was pushed out of. I don't want him to think that I took his place. He said that it's all par for the course, but I got the impression that he wasn't giving vent to everything that was passing through his head. I felt sure that he was hiding something, though it might be that he was only hiding the fact that there was nothing going on in there. Naturally, I never mentioned to him that I had aired my concern to our boss about Fred's emotional state, but nor did he mention to me that he had spoken to the boss about me, if ever he did. Besides, I only spoke about it in passing to the boss during our routine communications. I don't think I was telling him anything the authorities didn't already know. 2 days later. My new job has turned out to be harder than I expected. I have taken over Fred's monitoring task, and it's been difficult for my brain to adjust to the cerebral slotting process, since the program had modulated to Fred's brain patterns, and now has to adjust to mine at the same time as my brain adjusts to its demands. Fred wasn't such an idiot after all. At one point I started wondering whether management are thinking that I won't be around forever either. Perhaps they are exploiting me to the full. Is that what they did to Fred? And hoping that I will cave in and give up without claiming the full Pez dues that they owe me. But I soon stopped thinking in that pessimistic, paranoid manner. You're turning into Fred, I said to myself. Don't mope, Norby. Just do it, as the old proverb goes. It means that you mustn't think about things. You must do the job at hand you've been assigned to and get on with it. Don't think about it. That's good advice. I'm going to obey it straight away by going into sleep mode. Around 2 weeks later. My brain has got used to the program, and the program has got used to my brain. My task isn't as hard as I thought. I don't like hard work, but I'm actually a little disappointed. It's a bit boring. I have this uncomfortable feeling of not being useful. The good news is that I've discovered a game called Virtual Lunar Orgy, which I played with Dolly and a hired sex toy kit, including 2 lovely dollies. It's costly, and usually I'm careful about my savings, but what with Fred having gone, I kind of feel how fragile things are, and I get the sense that it all must come to an end sooner or later, so you might as well get a little enjoyment while you can. I've been thinking about my Pez. I keep wondering whether I would have made a better choice quitting early and living truly intensely while I've still got some of my youth left in me. I can almost feel it draining out of me sometimes. But don't get me wrong, Most of the time I have happy thoughts, the automatic hedono-regulators aiding. The following week. There hasn't been much to say. I work, I play. I've been looking into how to amend a PES scheme, but I can't make head or tail of the information I find. I've even been doing a little more research on the rules and regulations about suicide. Since I wrote about it not so long ago, it got me thinking. I just wanted to know more. It's easier than I imagined, and more people do it in their declining years than I had thought. Not that I would do it. Where's the logic, when you can have a blowout PES and go out in style? A blowout PES, I should explain, means a big payment for a highly reduced number of final years. Could it be that some people don't even want that? Around 3 weeks later. I've let my journal slip by the wayside of late. I didn't have much to say. It got busy at work at one point, so I was too tired to even tell you that I was tired and busy, which is probably not a bad thing, since it is pretty uninteresting information, as information goes. Then work eased up, and things slotted back into the lackluster grooves of routine that don't exactly erupt with things worthy of writing about. But all that changed utterly today. We had a problem with the IWA, that is, Inner Workings Area, of the docking station. I was assigned to go into the underground network to fix it. When I finally got down there, it's quite a trek, I had to look for the screen that tells you where all the tubes connect and all sorts of other technical stuff, which I know how to manipulate with my eyes closed, but can't explain without saying things like, you put the white thing on the blue rubbery what's-it between the stubby copper knobble and the grey squidgy thingamajib to the right, and so on and so forth. By the way, it's lucky that I can do it blindfolded, because it can be dark and dingy down there in some places. There's a fair bit of a stink wafting around here and there too. You often come across these scummy puddles that you have to walk around carefully, as though they were the hideouts of evil spirits, as was once the superstition of North Africans. Poisonous liquid or gas leaks have been known to occur. Not so long ago, the automatic detectors spotted a toxic gas leak. A section had to be closed off with the automatic doors that nearly closed a guy in who happened to be doing maintenance. Anyways, while I was at this screen, all sorts of noises were filling my ears. Engines and machines humming, purring and thudding, but among the din, I could just make out something very, very unusual. I could have sworn that it was the sound of soft, high-pitch female laughter. Something between a girly giggle and a song. It did something to me. It made me feel quite strange. I went down a corridor to try to find where it came from. My first thought was that it was some stray old sex doll belonging to a sly colleague who had snuck it down here to while away the time on some work assignment. As I said, it's often poorly lit down there, so I couldn't see much, but I could hear what sounded like muted footsteps in the distance. I followed them. Then I heard the sound again. It was a haunting, incantatory sound. I had to turn down another alley that was lit by a soft blue light. Things went on like this for some time, wandering along corridors full of wiring, intricate pipes and metal widgets. Sometimes the dominant light in the corridor was red, sometimes green, sometimes grey or blue. It's all deliberate because the corridors are colour-coded according to their function. This bewitching vocal presence was drawing me along sections of the basement unknown to me. Occasionally I saw the doll's shape flitting into a turning at the end of the corridor. I wasn't running, I don't know why. If I really wanted to catch it, then I should have darted off. But some bizarre apprehension was holding me back. You see, I wasn't sure that it was an it. I suspected that she might be a real woman. I walked fast to the end of the corridor and paused, partly because I didn't want to alert the source of the noise to my presence, and partly because I was actually rather scared. I managed to cover quite a lot of ground in this way, and was even in danger of getting lost. At one point, I had to stop and think which way I had come from. I also began to worry that I was wasting time on this strange pursuit. Someone might notice, and I might end up getting into trouble. Was this little chimera of a girly laugh really worth the bother? It was while I was in the midst of such self-questioning that I saw her standing still at the end of a corridor. I could not believe my eyes. She was a beautiful woman, a real woman, with long, straight, strawberry blonde hair hanging over her breasts, and a pretty little face, upon which I could see a teethy smile. But what was most arresting about this delightful vision was that she was almost naked, except for a brownish garment covering her sex area that must have had tiny strings keeping it up. I couldn't be sure because the light was dim and she was far away. But when my eyes finally made up my mind that it was not a trick of light or the effect of leaking toxic fumes, my heart nearly leapt out of my throat. It was a real woman, a marvel of womanly curves. I saw her turn her back to me and lean down to pick up some silvery silk garment that she slid swiftly over her shoulders, attached and robbed my eyes of the wonderful spectacle of her back, slender waist, round buttocks, and tapering thighs. I watched her flick long strands of bright hair over the back of this garment. I stood there marvelling in disbelief at the spectacle. Then she waltzed away, vanished. I was fixed on the spot for I know not how long. I eventually managed to rouse myself from my trance and went down the corridor I saw her disappear into. But at the end of that corridor there were 3 possible turnings. I stopped at this trifurcation and tried to listen out for her laughter or for the light patter of her bare feet, but I heard nothing and decided that I ought to go back. When I got back to the place I'd been assigned to, I finished the reparation job. It turned out to be not all that complicated, but all the while I was haunted by this ethereal feminine creature. Who was she? Was she allowed to be there? Who knew about her being there? When I voiced off my task report, I was about to inform Central Control about her, but something held me back. I didn't want to get her into trouble on the off chance that she had been doing something she wasn't supposed to be doing. But that wasn't the main reason. I wanted to keep the experience to myself, to hold it secretly to my chest, like something precious. It was my little revelation, and who knows, just maybe I might yet have occasion to find her out again.